Welcome to the Lifting Cues podcast, the podcast for lifters, answering all of your lifting questions and giving you all the cues you need to maximize your time in the gym to reach all of your strength and physique goals. I'm your host, Coach Quinn, aka Coach Q. I'm an online and in-person fitness coach. I've been a lifter for over half of my life, now aspiring to become a competitive powerlifter, and I'm looking to give you all of that insight as a lifter myself and as a coach, getting real people, real results to give you the best information that you need so that you can reach all of your strength and physique goals. And on today's episode, I want to tell you more about me. I want to give you my story. So last episode, I had a guest on the podcast, my friend and colleague, Coach Brandon Person, and he told his story. And his story is an incredibly powerful one of overcoming a life-threatening accident to then go on to compete in a powerlifting meet and be, one of the more jacked people I know and a great coach himself. And he said something that really spoke with me. He said that we all have a story to tell. We all have a perspective to share, and it will relate to someone. So because I had him on the podcast to tell his story, I'm going to have more guests in the future to tell theirs. I really wanted to give you mine so that you can understand where I come from, where I develop my perspective as a lifter. Hopefully something in here helps you, or you just really get a better understanding of where I came from and what took me from a young athlete growing up to now being a competitive powerlifter in my 30s. What does that journey look like? And my road is going to be different than others, but that is, what I want to show you is that everyone has a different journey to their destination. We're all going to get somewhere, but how we get there is our own journey. So let me give you mine. Like I said, I started out my younger years as an athlete, and that's really what I was. Like, I identified as that. That was my basically sole purpose growing up, was to be an athlete. I started playing sports when I was very young, probably like 5 or 6. I started with like t-ball and started playing football when I was 7, and that really became my sport. That was my sport until I was like 20 or 21. We'll get there. But that's really, like I said, what I identified as and kind of how I formed who I was. It developed a ton of lessons in me through athletics. So I learned, work ethic, teamwork, all these different kind of things, but really also like pushing through discomfort, how to work hard, how to just make small progress every single day to continue to get better, how to deal with failure, all these different kind of things. So that's really kind of what shaped me. But that doesn't explain necessarily the fitness journey. So that comes a little bit later. Like I said, I started playing football when I was around 7. I started lifting when I was 13. And it was end of 8th grade, trying to get, ready for high school football. And they got us in the gym, and it was immediately that I fell in love with it. I was like, this is the best thing ever. I think I went in the first day and sat on the bench press and started pressing the bar, and I was like, oh yeah, I like this. So that was great. It was really kind of an immediate, it just kind of clicked. I think having movement capabilities from being an athlete for most of my life, I'm sure that helped a lot, but it was just something that just made sense to me. It was and then every day you kept getting a little bit stronger. So every day was like a little win. And it was just I can't wait to go back and do it again. So the whole fitness and training thing, when I tell you I've been a lifter for over half of my life, I'm 32 now. I told you I started when I was 13. That journey in the gym, it never stopped. And that love for the gym has never gone away. I love the gym. I love the weights. The training always came easy to me. The harder part for me was nutrition. And that journey starts even earlier than the age of 13. I don't know exactly what age I was the first time that my mom told me I was kind of fat. I don't remember exactly the age, but I always was kind of a good natural athlete, right? So it was always oh, he's active. He's a good athlete. I started in all the sports that I played. I think back, I probably think I was better than I really was. But again, I always played. I was always, that one of those people on the team that like I I could hold my own in basically any sport that I played, except for basketball. Once I got old enough, I was terrible. But in baseball and football, I could hold my own for a while, and I was a good athlete. I was, could naturally pick things up. I was naturally kind of athletic because I didn't do a whole lot of work. I was always the kid in school too that like, we do like the push-up test in gym class or the mile run or the pull-up test. I could never do a pull-up. I couldn't do a pull-up until I think I was like 22 or 23. Because again, I was a stocky, pudgy kind of kid. So I wasn't good at a lot of those things. Like I wasn't great at push-ups. I didn't do a ton of push-ups. I kind of played my sport, and then I was a kid. I had fun outside of that. I like to be active and play, but like I didn't start working out really until I was like 13. That wasn't really a thing. I was always, like I said, the kid who couldn't do pull-ups, or I kind of sucked at the mile run. I could do a few push-ups, but not as many as I should have been for the type of athlete that I was. Again, so I never had that in me. I was very competitive, but I didn't have that work ethic behind me, and I never looked the part. Looking back at myself and looking at old pictures, like I said, I was soft, I was pudgy. I never had abs from the time I was like 4 years old when I was a skinny little kid to when I turned 25 or 26 and finally got into nutrition. So that journey was very, very different in that respect. Is like I was an athlete. I thought of myself as an athlete, but I didn't look the way that I felt. And I think that confused me. And again, going all the way back to, whatever age that was where, it was like, your parent says that you're kind of getting fat, and you get that in the back of your mind. Like, am I fat? I remember a conversation of that exact conversation. I think it was like, you're getting fat or whatever it was. And when your parent says that to you, that's something that's like, it kind of shocks you a little bit. So that, like I said, I still remember this very conversation. I don't know if I'm remembering it correctly, but this is the way that I remember it. And I think she asked me like, how many pops do you drink a day or something? I'm from Pittsburgh, so I say pop. But it was like, how many pops do you drink a day? And I think I was like 8 or 9 probably. And it was like, I don't know, 4 or 5. How many can I drink at that point in your life? So that was when I stopped drinking pop, basically forever. I still drank things like Gatorade, like sugary Gatorades and stuff, not realizing that it was basically the same thing. But I cut out pop right then and there. And that helped for a while. And again, still into athletics, but always this thing in the back of my mind, like I'm this thicker kid. I'm a stocky kid. Like it was just always something I identified as. And I remember another time later in life, my mother, again, if you're catching a theme here, of what kind of shaped, my body image, how I viewed myself. This is really, this is how deep I'm going into my story. I want you guys to really understand my mindset of where I was, when I started lifting and was really getting into these things. So, this is still kind of in those formative early teenage years. I remember, I think it was once I kind of started working out, but still like my nutritional habits, I didn't understand it because all I knew was like what I was raised with, which was just, your basic standard American sort of diet of like, breakfast was a Pop-Tart or cereal. Lunch was like a sandwich and chips that your mom made, and then whatever she made for dinner, and going out to eat and all that stuff. I was a kid. I didn't understand nutrition. We weren't taught. You're just not taught the way that I think we should be. But anyway, I'm kind of, not really understanding why my body is not still looking the way that I feel. I feel like an athlete, but I don't look like one. I think, like I said, my mom called me soft. She said, "You're soft. You're like squishy." I remember that very vividly too, of like, I'm soft. I've been working out though. Look, I'm big. But it was like, you're not, I didn't have any definition. I was just thick. I was just a thick, soft, pudgy kid who happened to be a half decent athlete. It didn't help that I was always kind of short too. I had a growth spurt in like the 8th grade, but even then, like we had to make weight for football, and I remember it was like 165 pounds, and I was 160-ish. So I was always like, I had a little nerve going into those weigh-ins because I'm like, ooh, if I'm over 165, I can't play, and this is like all I do. So it was like a little nerve-wracking. You had to take your shirt off because it was like I might not make it, but I always made it. I never missed. But thinking about that already too, of like I'm a thicker kid, I'm just bigger. So having that in the back of my mind. So keep this in mind of this theme going forward of, how I view my body, and that's going to help kind of shape what I do in fitness and eventually with nutrition going forward. So I finally get to about that age of, sophomore year of high school, super into the gym. Like I said, it was love at first sight, and I just dove all in. And I got this. We got like a new football coach the one year, my sophomore year, and he was very serious. He like redid the whole weight room and had like a strength program. He came from a school in Ohio, and if you know anything about Ohio football, it's probably more serious than Western Pennsylvania. Surprisingly, I was shocked to find that out. I went to college in Ohio, played football there, but this guy came from Ohio where, the strength training was a big part of what they did. And we never had that at my high school. My high school's not very good at football either. But anyway, I digress. But he brought in a new gym, new strength program. And again, I was just like, oh my God, like this is so much fun. Like squatting as much weight as I could and, always benching. We power cleaned at the time because people thought that you had to be that develop more explosiveness or something. It's okay. I was never very good at power clean, but that's where that started. So I started with squat, bench, power clean, and then, just whatever else we wanted to do. And we had some other great coaches on the staff that really kind of helped me understand lifting and how to understand even just building muscle. Like they would help us after we actually stayed after the workouts to do more work because we just wanted to get jacked. There was a few of us that took it very, very seriously. And right then and there, I started to fall in love with the training, the lifting aspect, the gym, more than the actual sport. The sport was a means to get me in the gym at that point. I was like, oh, I just love the gym. Like I just love working out and I love training for the sport more than I loved playing it at that point because, again, like I said, my high school was terrible at football. We were so bad, and it just wasn't that much fun. But I was like, okay, this is a means to get to college. At that time, I was about the same size I am now. So I'm 5'8", sophomore year of high school, like 195-ish pounds, which is basically right where I'm at right now. And I thought, oh, great, I'll grow. I'll get a scholarship to go play football, blah, blah, blah. Needless to say, none of that happened. I stopped growing right then and there, at least height-wise. But, yeah, it was just kind of like, okay, well, I still love the gym. I still love training. I love training for football. And I thought that I just loved football, but looking back on it, I'm like, I just love to lift. I just love to train. So that was where I kind of fell in love with the gym. I think I squatted 405 before I left high school. I think I was close to that. Yeah. Squatted probably 405 before I left high school. My bench was never that good. I think I could get like 275 by the time I left high school, somewhere around there. But that kind of stalled out after that. But again, this is just kind of my lifting journey. And through this whole journey, again, I'm still not looking the part. Like I'm not looking like I'm a thick, big kid. Like people like knew I lifted weights. Like you could tell like, oh, Quinn's thick. But I never had like a 6-pack or like when I took my shirt off, it never looked like I wanted it to. And it was just like, why not? And you're getting all this success in the gym. My strength gains were awesome. I was playing better on the field. I was a better athlete. I got into like speed training at that time too, again, because I was very serious about trying to play college or college football. So I got into speed training, also fell in love with that. I had an amazing trainer in Pittsburgh. His name's Ed Weedholder at Strength, Fitness, and Speed. I don't know if anyone knows that place or listens, or who listens to this knows that place in Pittsburgh, but awesome trainer, like just also made me fall in love with training and like the science behind everything. And he knew all these different things. He knew about anatomy, he knew about explosiveness. He just knew how to train and how to coach, and that really made me fall in love with it. I wish I would have thought more about it at that time of becoming a coach or, you know, some kind of trainer or going into fitness as a career, but I didn't see it as a money maker at that time. So it was like, it's this thing I love. It's a great hobby, but it's never going to be, it can't be my whole life because I have to go make money. That's again down the line. But again, I'm really developing this whole love for fitness through the sport of football. Training for that, I've really kind of focused in on this is going to be my thing. So that's the only sport I'm playing now at the age of high school. Again, having great success in the gym, getting big, but still with this background body image thing. And just at the time, I still didn't understand nutrition. I was just a high school kid. Like, you're eating fast food, you finally start to drive, you go out with your friends, like all this kind of stuff. And then, you know, into my high school years, my later high school years is when I really got into drinking. I started drinking again when I was 13, interestingly enough. So that's a whole journey in itself of who I am and how I became who I am. I started drinking at the age of 13 with my friends, and immediately, again, another thing that was like, oh, this is the thing. Like, I immediately loved the feeling, for lack of a better word. And obviously, you know, at the age of 13, I had no idea what I was doing. So you just get way too drunk. And then, you know, through your high school years, I just never learned how to control it. I always just loved doing it. Everything about it. And that just led to more and more kind of unhealthy habits that I wasn't even realizing at the time. So I'm not eating well. I didn't understand like proper nutrition, protein, how to, you know, utilize carbohydrates. I was just eating whatever I could. I didn't care. And as much as I could. And I think that's probably another thing that led to some issues for me as well. It's just like, for as long as I can remember, like, I could eat. Like, I can eat a lot. My hunger, I don't know when this got messed up, but like my hunger signals just, they're not the same as everybody else's. Like, it's like, stop when you're full. I didn't know when that was. I didn't understand, like, until I ate to the point where I was just so bloated and like so full. I didn't know what it like meant to stop eating when you were like full, like when you were good. There was no good. It was just like, is there still food on the table? Yeah, I'll eat it. Like, you know, I grew up in a family of 4. My mom would make, you know, 6 steaks. I'd probably eat 2 and like an extra half a baked potato and like, you know, that kind of stuff. It was like, yeah, I'll take the second serving right now. When I made a sandwich when I was at home, it was stacked, you know, inches thick with meat, not just a few. Like, I can't imagine what my mom's grocery bill was like. I don't even think about it too often, but until right now. But just thinking about like how much I could put away, and then when it came time to make my own decisions about food, and you know, you get into those later years of high school and you have some money from like a job or whatever, and you go out with your friends and buy your own food. Like, I never held back on that. Like, I just went for it, and never really thought much about it because I, again, still had zero understanding of nutrition. Like, I didn't realize that like how bad things were for you and just how much I was eating. Like, I had no concept. There was no concept of calories from the way that I grew up. So I'm doing all this lifting and stuff, and it's just like, I'm not looking like the athletes that I see and want to be like. And I'm like, why? I don't understand. So it's just this constant like chasing of how do I look a different way. So, but through all of that, I'm making awesome strength gains. Like, again, it was so much fun to lift and be in the gym. And that was where I was the most successful. Again, we weren't very successful on the field, but I was crushing it in the gym. I killed it in the off season, so I loved it. And that was just kind of immediate from there. And, being in athletics, you get a variety of training. Again, I was squatting, benching, power cleaning, doing plyometrics. We were sprinting. We had to have endurance. Like, it was really, being an athlete at any kind of level that is successful or whatever, like you have to be, you're kind of a hybrid athlete in a way. So it was really cool to be able to train in a bunch of different ways and understand training and just how to push yourself in the gym. I think that was also when I was kind of introduced to like how to build up your 1 rep max and how to do percentage based training. And like we had percentages in high school that was like, do this percent of your max. And it was like, oh, look, I get stronger. And you keep seeing that max go up when you continue to put in the work. Because while you're in high school and like, there's certain kids that really take to it. There's certain kids that don't. And you see the kids that don't, they don't make the strength gains that they would want to. And they look at you and they're like, how are you doing that? How are you so strong? And it's like, I'm just putting in the work. And you start to understand that again of putting in the work. And also another thing that happened in high school, which was really, really, I don't remember how this happened. Again, like I said, played football for a long time. I've taken a lot of hits to the head. Not to get into a whole discussion about that, but I got into supplements too, like really, really early. I think because I got so into training, I started getting on like, it was right at the start of the internet, getting on, internet websites and learning about lifting and supplements and bodybuilding.com and all this kind of stuff of like, oh, like this stuff really helps. So I think I started taking creatine when I was like 16 or something like that. I had to get my mom to like buy it for me. I was like, look, I need this stuff. Bless her heart, she did. But I started doing that when I was like 16 and getting into supplements. And like, this is how deep I was getting into the training aspect of it and really just loving this and wanting to change what I could do physically and what I looked like physically. Again, the physical transformation wasn't quite happening, which I didn't understand, but I was trying, still being, pudgy, soft, all that stuff. But then eventually, I end up playing college at the Division III level, which if you don't understand Division III, you basically pay to go to college to play football at a decent level. Like kids are good. It's just most of the kids are smaller, a little less athletic, not big enough to get a scholarship, whatever it might be, but end up playing at the D3 level. Again, that's all I wanted to do. That's who I was. I thought no matter what, I was going to do something that involved football. And I got interest from some really good schools that I thought I could get a really good education. Again, paying to do it, but we're talking about training here. We're not talking about just college in my life. But going into my freshman year of college, I remember my college sent me like a strength and conditioning program for the summer. And I dove all into this shit. Like I was on point. I remember I was texting the coach like questions about the program. He didn't even write the freaking thing. And he's trying to give me answers. Looking back on it, I'm like, he was just bullshitting his way through it. But there was a coach on the staff that had a strength and conditioning degree, and he wrote a really good program. I did it, and I was in the best shape of my life. I'm 18 years old, best shape of my life. I go into camp ready to go, like just smoke everything. Like I said, I was speed training. I ran a really great 40. I crushed the conditioning test. My maxes were all sick. Like I said, I was squatting over 400 pounds at the time. Benching, I think I got up to the threes by that point. Like, I was just crushing everything. People were like, I remember kids saying I thought he was a senior when I walked in. Like, I was big. I was probably like 205 at this point. Like, I'm a thick dude, a decent athlete. Like, it was awesome. Training was the best. But again, still didn't look the way that I wanted to. I thought I looked a certain way, but then I'd catch myself with my shirt off, and it was like, that's not what I want to look like. Why don't I still look the way that I want to? So just continuing to train and train and train. And then that freshman year, I ended up starting, which was sick. I felt really great about that, all that hard work you put in. So that's kind of where understanding that the work that you put in the gym really freaking pays off. Like, it was showing in my performance. And that, also made me kind of fall in love with that process, that if you put in the work and you put in the time, you will get the result. So it gave me that understanding. And the gym was a means to get where I wanted to go. And at this point, going into college, no one was telling me, no one was pushing me. Like, there was no one watching. I was doing this part on my own. And that was also very rewarding, of learning how to push myself to do something that I really wanted to do. I really wanted to go to college and play awesome and start. So I put in the work in the off season in the gym, and that led me to the result that I wanted, of being the best that I could be at that time and earning that starting spot. I think that had a lot to do with it. But anyway, I ended up tearing my ACL that year. It was the most serious injury I've ever had, probably the only serious injury I've ever had. Knock on wood, knocking on my head there. Like I said, a lot of hits. But so I kind of had to go through that rehab process. And so that's kind of where my understanding of how to come back from an injury really started, and the prehab process, and just everything that goes along with that. So again, I dove all into that. It was super interesting to me. We had a really good athletic trainer at the school that I went to, shockingly. But like, I attacked the rehab process the same way that I attacked the gym going into college, because it was like, this is not going to stop me. Like, I'm going to be ready to go. And my goal was be ready by spring ball. I'd never had a spring because we didn't do that in high school, but like in college, spring ball, they're like, hey, this is a big deal. This is where people earn their spot. And I got injured during the season, so it was like, I got to earn my spot back. So my goal was to come back. So I attacked that rehab process the same way that I attacked the gym. And just fascinating, like how you build the body back up and how you try to build the muscle around an injury, and just starting back from square one, learning to understand movement and stretch and balance and just all this stuff that just fascinated me. Like, I looked forward to going to rehab, because it was like, oh, I get to do these exercises and get better. And that's really all I could do at that point. I mean, I could do some upper body stuff, but that was really it. And then I end up, getting all the way back. And I think it was my junior year. So this happened my freshman year. Start of my junior year, I squatted 500 pounds. Bench 335 and did whatever on the power clean, who cares. But that was as strong as I've ever been, and I was 20. Coming back from an ACL injury a year and a half before, just again diving all in, and coming back again to the drinking thing. This is part of my journey for sure. My sophomore year, I was ready to go, and they suspended me for half the season because I got drunk at school and did some shit to some people that I definitely should not have done. I said some stuff to some people that was just not acceptable, but again, part of who I was, and it was part of this growth and showing still that I was not a healthy person outside of the gym. And I didn't, looking back on it, like I regret being that person that I was. And I wish I understood better what I was doing to myself and to others. Because again, I was so focused on like, I'm just this athlete. Like, this is all I am. I don't care about anything else. And I think not developing the person that I was outside of the gym, like, I was developing all of these lessons in the gym and in athletics of like, put in the work, be consistent, put in the time, do all the right things. But I wasn't taking that outside of the gym. I didn't love who I was, so I think I tried to mask it. And looking back on it, I mean, it's really sad. And I don't know if I've ever really said that out loud until right now. So you're getting breaking news here. But it was really, really hard to do that, or to look back and have been that person. It just makes me feel bad about like what could I have been had I actually taken the lessons that I was learning, lifting and in the gym, and take them with me and be the person that I really wanted to be. But again, unhealthy habits led to consequences that I didn't want. And at no point did I ever stop training either. Like, I got suspended. I was still in the best shape of my life. Still worked really, really hard. It was harder to work super hard without that end goal in mind of like, I need to be ready for this point. But I still dove into the gym, and that's where I had the most confidence, always in the gym, because it was, again, from day one, I walked in and I was really good at it. Like, I loved doing it. And it just came naturally to me, and it gave me that confidence, and it gave me the muscle mass and the size that like people noticed, and that changed who I was, and that led me to never giving up on it and always wanting to be physically the person that I wanted to be in the gym. So, still dove into that, but, again, I squat 500 pounds at the age of 20. I have no idea if I hit depth. There's no video of this that I know of. They gave me the lift. I barely remember it. I remember I unracked it and I was like, this is the heaviest shit I've ever felt in my life. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And then I just blacked out, went down and up, and everybody was cheering. So I knew I hit it, but I was like, I have no idea if I hit depth. We're going to try and hit 500 again here this year. So that'll be the first time since I was 20 that I will have hit a weight that big, which would be freaking awesome. Anyway, I played that whole year through, again, falling in love with fitness. And I think this is around the time that like me and my friends in college, like we were going to the gym on like off days, or we'd go to the gym together in the off season. And that really started to build the community around the gym. And like, oh, you go to the gym with your boys and you get jacked. Like, we were doing, bodybuilding style workouts in the off season and just crushing the volume. And like, this is also the time where like we started like morning workouts for football. And like, I pretended to hate it, but I didn't. I loved getting up early, getting in the gym and just crushing it. Like, they'd blast music and just scream at us, and it was everything. Like, that was the most alive I'd ever felt up until that point. So, I mean, this is really what I mean when I say I'm a lifter. Like, I lifted for a living. Like, that was what I did to live. Everything else outside of there was not, conducive to being the person that I wanted to be. The drinking, I was still overeating. I was eating like shit. I still had no concept of like what I was doing nutritionally. Like, we would go on little spurts of like going to the cafeteria and getting like rice, chicken breast, and broccoli. We'd do that for like a week. And then we'd get hammered on the weekend, eat 3 whole pizzas. And, it was that kind of a cycle. We would try really hard, but like I wasn't getting where I wanted to with my physical body. I was like 210 pounds at this point now. I was thick. I was a little bowling ball playing linebacker in college. But it still was eating at me that I didn't look the way that I wanted to. Like when I took my shirt off, I didn't look like the fittest person in the room, and that hurt me. And I was beginning to tie myself to this body image and having a negative outlook on my body image and who I was. So anyway, my college career ends after that. So that was my junior year, where again, we're going to come back to drinking. I drank myself out of college, basically, for lack of a, we don't have to get into the whole thing, but that was kind of the end of that. And then, I was kind of lost at that point. I was like, I have nothing to train for. I still love this training thing. Like, what am I going to do? So, I went home, got a job, was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. But the one thing that remained constant was the gym. Again, that was my happy place. That's where I felt alive. That's where I felt confidence. So I kept finding myself getting in the gym, no matter what else I was doing. What I was doing nutritionally, what I was doing with drinking, what my family life was like, if I had a girlfriend or not, it didn't matter. I remember getting a girlfriend at the time when I got back home, and like she couldn't understand that like I could not miss the gym. No matter what, I would leave work and go straight to the gym. And she would get upset with me. We were young, mind you. I don't blame her for this. I don't even know where she is now. This was so long. It was over 12 years ago, probably. I was still like 20, 21. 21 around this time. But anyway, she could not understand that I couldn't not go to the gym. She's like, you can't skip it for one day. And I was like, absolutely not. I have a program to follow. I have a plan. Like, I was training with my friends, and like that was our time to, after work, we'd go and just bang some weights, get an awesome pump. And it was a great time. Like, that was where I lived. And training was always still that thing. I still didn't have any of the other healthy habits yet, but training remained consistent. And after I stopped training for athletics and lifting heavy and heavy and heavy for so long and doing so much legs, so much leg training when you train for athletics, obviously for obvious reasons. But I was one of those dudes that I was like, I'm never training legs again. And I didn't for a while. I was, strictly like upper body bodybuilding. Lucky enough for me, again, I have a stocky kind of muscular build, so I never looked like I didn't train legs, but there was a time when I didn't. I got back into it because around this time, I wasn't training for athletics anymore. I needed a goal, and bodybuilding always struck me. Again, thinking about my body image issues and all of that, all I did was I looked into how to develop a better body. I needed abs. I needed to look like the person I felt like. I felt like a very fit person who loved to work out, but I needed to look like that dude. So that was everything I was doing. It turned into, I'm going to become a bodybuilder. Like, this is what I'm going to do. So that's what I was focused on, and that's why I was training the way that I was, and I had a supplement regimen. I was always taking pre-workout. I was always taking creatine. I was always had my protein powder. Like, I was that guy at that age. I had a shitty job. I had no money. I lived at home. I was going to become a bodybuilder, but yet I was still eating like shit. I worked at Kennywood Park, which, if you don't know what that is, it's an amusement park. And we would literally eat like fucking amusement park food every single day, and then go to the gym and think we were going to like work it off. This is kind of where I'm at right now at the age of 21. It's like, it's cool. I'm going to work out later. We're doing legs. Like, I'll eat a basket of French fries and fucking whatever. And then I would go home or go to my girlfriend's house that I was talking about, and we would smoke weed and get drunk, and I'd again eat like shit, sleep like shit, wake up early, work at Kennywood, go to the gym, eat like shit, smoke, drink, do the whole thing. That was what I was doing at 21, thinking I'm going to become some sort of like bodybuilder. So lesson learned here is that you never can outwork a bad diet, because no one outworked me in the gym. Like, again, remember, I love this shit. Like, no one outworked me in the gym. Like, people at the gym I went to offered me a job. He taught me how to get some shitty PT cert. I was in college at the time and working another job, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do this PT thing. It seems awesome. Like, I love this. I love the gym. And like, at that time, I just wasn't ready for what the schedule was, and like, they didn't run the gym the way that it should ever be run. Like, I'd give them a schedule, and then they'd schedule me clients when I told them I couldn't work. And that left kind of a bad taste in my mouth as far as training went. And again, I was a 22-year-old fucking idiot who just wanted to smoke and drink and do whatever the fuck I wanted while I was trying to get a degree and just bang weights around and just be the thick dude, basically, is what I was. That was basically my life at that point. So anyway, I kind of go through this phase, and I kind of just make my way through until I end up getting in more trouble with drinking, finding myself with not one, but 2 DUIs, just needing to get my shit together. And then finally it's like, okay, what are you doing, dude? Like, so I kind of try to figure out where I'm going, and eventually I needed to move out of my house because I was going to school in the city. I lived outside of the city. I was losing my license. I needed to be at school. I couldn't commute anymore. So anyway, long story short, dating a new person at the time who is now my wife. And dating her, I move in with her because she lives in the city. I can take the bus, sweet. But anyway, so I'm doing this. I finally move out of the house, and it's like, oh, you have to buy your own groceries. So now I need to start thinking about food. Again, lifting never stopped. There was a gym at my school that I could go to for free. So that was even awesomer. I loved going in there, still crushing the workouts. Bodybuilding still at this point. And now I'm like, okay, I got to buy my own groceries. What do we eat? Because I never cared, like, what was on the table. It was just like, whatever mom brought home was what I ate. Whatever was there, I would eat. And I would eat as much of it as I wanted because I was a shithead who didn't care, like, you know, how much money people were spending on groceries, and I didn't have a satiety signal to stop me from eating. So, long story short, now I got to buy my own food. Now I got to start thinking about, well, what do you eat? So, you know, and how much does food cost? And how do I build like a diet? You know, all these things that were so foreign to me, which might shock some people, I think, because I think most people think that, you know, fitness professionals just kind of have always known what to do, or maybe we were raised just with better understanding of food, but like, we didn't all have this. And again, I have overeating issues. I have hunger, satiety issues. I don't understand food at all at this point. My body shows it. I don't like the body that I live in. All I want to do is change it. All I'm trying to do is change it. And I had no idea that nutrition was kind of the cause of all of this. So anyway, long story short, start to think about what to eat. Okay, so we're buying, you know, chicken, fish, rice, beans. That was kind of our main, like, source of food at the time. Like, that was kind of our staples in the diet. That was what we were eating for dinner all the time. And then the weekends were still just kind of whatever. It was like we'd kind of starve ourselves all week eating this bland ass chicken, rice, and beans. And then we'd have pizza and we'd drink still and like all this kind of stuff. So still having all of these unhealthy habits. Things start to change a little bit, but I still was like just not really getting into this. Not really understanding the nutrition thing. I don't know how, of all the stuff I would read about, fitness and nutrition, like I just loved the gym. Like I just loved to train. I didn't care about food. And I had no like realization like this was affecting my body in this super negative way. And I think it goes back to we're just not really taught. Like you're kind of taught in school, like what protein is and what carbohydrates are and what fat is. But I never had that light bulb moment of like the things you put in your face hole affect how you feel and how you look. Like it was just never like a thing. Like, and like people went on diets when they were fat. I'm sorry to say that, but this is how I was thinking at the time. Put yourself back. But like it was only those people that needed to go on diets, and because I wasn't fat. I was just thick and I didn't have abs, but like it wasn't like, oh, I need to go on a diet to get where I want to go. Like I said, I just wasn't putting all these things together. I was understanding training, I was understanding lifting and how to build muscle and figuring out all that, but I wasn't tying in the diet piece of it. Okay. So, we do this for a few years. We're in this endless cycle. And then my partner, who was my girlfriend at the time, was like, hey, I'm kind of dealing with my hormone stuff and like going through all these things with her own body and wanting to change it. And then she finds this thing called the paleo diet. And this kind of starts my diet like awakening. I'm probably 24, 25 at this point. Okay. So this kind of starts our diet awakening. Now, keep in mind, I had been eating tilapia, chicken, rice, and beans for basically a year and a half-ish at this point, probably. About a year at this point. That was all we were eating, and then we were just doing whatever on the weekends. So she reads off, like, I'm like, okay, well, like, what do you do? And she's like, well, you basically just eat what you ate in the Paleolithic era is the idea. If you don't know what the paleo diet is, that's basically what it is. You eat what your ancestors ate prior to, large scale farming, really any kind of farming-ish in general. Basically, you can't eat grains, like anything that's processed that you can't really find in nature is what you eat. But she's like, we can eat red meat, we can eat sweet potatoes, we can eat bacon, we can eat blah, blah, blah. So she says those things, and I was like, wait a minute, we can eat steak? We're going to eat steaks? I was like, I'm in. Again, me not caring. I didn't care about nutrition because I didn't understand the point. I just liked food because it tasted good, and I ate what tasted good, and I ate as much as I wanted to. So it was like, great, I'll do this with you. That sounds awesome. I get to eat steaks and potatoes and bacon. Cool. So we did that. And then we start to learn about, oh, this is how kind of carbohydrates affected our body. And we noticed some pretty good changes by like cutting out things like bread and processed sugars and a lot of baked goods. And if you're listening to me say this and going, yeah, dude, you cut out calories and you ended up looking better. I know. Didn't realize this at the time. Again, my nutritional knowledge at this point is extremely, extremely limited. So again, still training like a madman, still loving the gym, didn't have a gym membership. I'm out of college at this point, had a gym membership wherever we lived, whatever I could do to be in the gym, never missed a workout. Like it was like, nope, don't do that. And then, my wife gets into the gym because she can't stop me from going. So it's like, if we want to be together, I guess I got to go to the gym. So she starts getting into training. This is where my coaching, began, is kind of coaching her of like, this is what we do in the gym. So that kind of started my coaching, and seeing her get stronger and better in the gym and more confident kind of gave me that initial inkling of like, oh, I could do this. I'm working like an office job at the time. Anyway, so that kind of starts the nutritional journey, and we start to cut out more carbohydrates. And then she finds keto and kind of explains it to me. And it's like, okay, we went paleo and I feel a lot better. I'm not eating all this junk. I'm not over consuming calories, because you're not eating, bread products and baked goods and things that are high in fat, sugar. We basically cut out all sugar from our diet for the most part. And, even like artificial sweeteners, we basically cut out all processed food, which leads to less overconsumption, less calories in general, and just, you feel really good. So we had already cut out all of that. So it was like, oh, it must have been the carbs. We hear about keto and how carbohydrates are making us fat, and then dove all into that. Like, we were all in, especially me, because I started to read some books, and they really made a lot of sense. The insulin hypothesis makes a lot of sense. So it goes like this. If you don't understand why low carb is a thing, let me explain it to you, because I know exactly why. So basically, when you eat things that are high in sugar, they spike your insulin levels. Insulin is a storage hormone. So insulin rises to take nutrients and disperse them to your body, macronutrients, everything. So basically what happens is you eat all this sugar, this insulin rises, it stores things into fat tissue. And if you don't burn off all the sugar that you eat, it stores as fat because of this insulin. So it makes a lot of sense to someone who still doesn't really understand calories. Like, I cut out processed foods and grain and those kind of products, and I lost weight and I looked better, and I was like, ooh, I feel better too. Interesting. So now it's like, okay, I'm diving all in. And we did keto the paleo way too. So at that time, there was no processed, I don't even remember there really being keto ice creams. I don't think they were a big deal. I think it was we were kind of right at the start of that really taking off and becoming a thing. I'm sure it existed, but we were in this paleo world where we're reading every ingredient on the label, not looking at the macronutrients or anything like that, just reading the ingredients. Is there anything artificial in here? Are there any oils that I don't like? Couldn't have canola oil because that's so processed and blah, blah, blah. So we're doing that, but then we do the keto version of that. So now we've cut out even more from our diet. We're basically just eating meat and vegetables and eggs. And does that work ever? Does that ever work? Yes. Low carb and ketogenic diets do work. But again, not because of anything magical. It is because of the calories that you're eating. But this is my introduction to calories as well, because now I start to look at the macronutrient contents of food. So I'm understanding how much fat is in something, and how much protein, and how much carbs, and how to understand if there's added sugars, how much fiber, net carbs. You could have plenty of those if you had plenty of fiber. So I'm getting now plenty of fiber, healthy fats, because I'm not eating a bunch of processed stuff. So all my fats are quote unquote healthy fats. We're eating grass-fed beef. We're eating all this stuff. So, and because that stuff is so expensive, we can only eat so much of it. So we're doing that at this point in time. Then we also get into fasting, because that kind of goes along with ketogenic diets, because you're burning so much fat throughout the day that you might as well just keep that process going longer. You're able to kind of stay fuller longer. And that really did work for a while. I got extremely lean at this point. I've still been doing basically bodybuilding training this whole way up. I maintained a baseline level of strength, but I didn't lift heavy anymore. So that's kind of where that goes. And I'm lifting at like a Gold's Gym. So I'm fucking keto. I'm shredded. I'm doing bodybuilding style training. It feels really good. Like, people are still commenting like, oh man, how do you do what you do? How do you look like that? Blah, blah, blah. So it's still stroking that ego in that way. So I still always had that lifting love. I was still like, oh, this is great. Like I finally look like what I want to look like. And as I finally get lean, I finally see my abs. I finally have reached this point that I thought I was like, oh, this is it. Like now I can finally become a bodybuilder. Like this is what it means. And then you start to dissect yourself and you're like, wait a minute. I look a little too small here, or there's still too much fat on my stomach. I actually became more obsessed with what I looked like now, because now I not only understood, what it was like to not look like I wanted and to finally get some results of what I looked like, but I also knew how to manipulate my body. So I was like, oh, I want to do all these things too, and like this doesn't look right and this isn't right and I wish this looked better. So the lesson kind of goes to say, like, I don't know if you're ever gonna reach the point that you're like, okay, I've made it, my body is the finished product that I always wanted it to be, and now I am happy. Because that was the last frontier for me, was like, oh, you gotta have abs and like look shredded. And I did. And I didn't like it. Well, I liked it, but I still didn't love myself. So that was really hard. And I didn't come to terms with that until a few weeks ago. And I'm still like 26-ish at this point. So it was like, I spent all that time still, like, there's still more to this story of like where I came from and what it was. So it was like, okay, like, why am I still not happy with who I am? So then it was like, let me continue to manipulate things about my diet and trying every different kind of like fast that I could do and thinking that was going to make it all better. And then, doing all kinds of different things, even trying like carnivore and stuff at one point. Like I dove all in. There's still an Instagram account out there called the Fat Fed Meathead. That was my keto Instagram account. And I look back at that sometimes and look at the food I was eating and I'm just stunned. So if you want to check that out and have a good laugh, you definitely can. But I understand how easy it is to be consumed by, these kind of diet tribalism things and like, oh, it really works for me, so it will definitely work for everybody and this is the way to do it. And so, but I was like, I still don't look like what I want to look like. So I was like, damn it. All right. So then I'm still trying to figure out, how to make my body exactly what I want. And I go to this gym that was like pretty decent powerlifting gym. Like these dudes were lifting heavy weights. So I was like, oh, I remember that. Like maybe I should try that again. It's probably been 7-8 years. Not 7-ish years since I really lifted heavy. I was like, let me see if I can do that again. So I try to start lifting heavy and I'm like, it just doesn't feel that good. It didn't feel great. I was like, I can't get that much stronger. And then, like I said, I was shredded, but I wasn't able to get any bigger. So I was like, something must be going on with this diet thing. Like maybe there is something to carbs give you energy and carbs help you recover and build muscle and do all this stuff. So I was like, interesting. Maybe I'm just tapped out. Maybe I need to get carbohydrates back in my diet. And it became this kind of thing of like trying to rediscover where carbohydrates fit in. And then you start to find more evidence-based practitioners and realizing that carbohydrates aren't actually bad. All you're doing with a low carb or ketogenic diet is cutting out an entire macronutrient and therefore cutting calories. The food becomes less palatable. You just eat less in general because you're not eating an entire macronutrient profile. And then you realize there's nothing actually magic about low carb. And a few of the things that really changed my mind were just some stuff that came out. There was a podcast Joe Rogan did with Dr. Stephen Guyenet, who wrote The Hungry Brain, and Gary Taubes, who wrote the original like low carb books that I told you I dove into and really loved. So there was a debate between these two, and I was still pretty low carb at the time. And I remember watching that podcast and going, Gary looks pretty bad. Like, he didn't really say anything that had to do with science or like really anything. And then I watched a bunch of reaction videos after that, and like they were really tearing it apart. And like when everybody started to really break down science of like, no, this is what the studies actually say, I was like, they've actually done studies on this. And then you realize that the same guy, Gary Taubes, and a bunch of other low carb kind of scientists, doctor, just people out there that I was following, they started a group. They started a study group to study the low carb diet. And they paired it up against, higher carb diets. And they were doing these studies on weight loss, and they weren't showing the results that they wanted. So they shut down the entire program in general. And that was when I was like, oh, so these guys aren't serious about doing science at all. They're just serious about pushing their agenda. And like I said, then you dig into all of the science around, it's not the carbohydrates, it's just the calorie load in general, blah, blah, blah. Insulin spikes are completely normal. They go up and then they go down. As long as they come down in a reasonable amount of time, you don't have, a diabetic issue. So it was this eye-opening experience. It was like, oh, I can eat carbohydrates again. And then like I can make my diet more sustainable, because even still at this point, I'm still drinking. I'm still eating occasionally on the weekends. And when I got the opportunity to eat carbs, I would just, again, go into this binge mode of like, let me get them all because I'm never going to get it again. And it's like, one, why did I feel like I needed to eat every single carbohydrate in sight? And two, like, do I want to feel like shit every time I eat carbohydrates? Because that's what happened. You almost feel hungover. Even when I didn't drink and I would eat carbs at that point, it was like, oh shit, like I feel terrible, because your body just didn't know how to process it at that point. So it was like, do I want to feel like this every time I want to eat something? Like, this ended up not being sustainable. Now, I will say that I did keto/low carb for like 3-ish years, like hard. Like we went to Christmases, we did birthdays, and we didn't eat any carbs. We didn't eat sugar. We would get mad at people if they would serve us a carbohydrate or sugar. Like we were those people. So I did go hard at it, but again, it cost us social capital. It cost us some happiness. So it was like, is that really worth doing? And all of this is happening at the same time that are carbohydrates bad for me? And I wanted to improve my performance that was stalled in the gym, and I wanted to build more muscle that I couldn't build. So all this came together to be like, well, what's the answer? And that's where I kind of found flexible dieting. I had this great understanding of calories and macros, so I could easily kind of plan out my meals and, figure out what was in foods and make good food choices still, because I had the paleo background. I understood, what not to eat, what was super processed, how to read a food label. So it was easy for me to then transition to flexible dieting. So I think it's really important, no matter what, to really understand how to read a food label, what's in food, portion sizes, all that stuff. And all of those steps led me to where I am now. So I don't regret any of them. And I got, the most shredded I've ever been. I felt great, all this kind of stuff. So I don't regret doing any of those diets or learning about them and understanding them, because now I understand also where people are coming from. So it led me to be able to help people and understand nutrition on a much higher level than I ever had before. So that was also great. So all of those things were awesome. I wish I hadn't been as dogmatic. And, telling people that they were killing themselves by eating too much sugar or, whatever it was. But, you know, can't take back that part of your past. But I wish I hadn't done that. And I wish I wouldn't have wasted time not building the muscle that I wanted to. I feel like I probably left some gains and some understanding on the table. Maybe things would be different now with where I am. Maybe I either would have gotten into competitive strength earlier, or I would have ended up actually taking the bodybuilding route. But again, with my body image issues and stuff like that, I don't think that would have been the best move. But anyway, I kind of finally found like flexible dieting, how to build my diet sustainably, and again, how to make good food choices and understand what is in food. So even when I go out now, I can understand basically what I'm ordering. Like, I know what sauces are high fat. I know where to look for added fat in things so that when I go out, I can make a lower calorie option, or where there's typically added sugars in like barbecue sauces, or, random things like that I understand intuitively now because I had done it for so long. But without that food understanding, it's really, really hard to get there and understand that. So again, don't regret that at all. And I think it actually really helped me to develop this understanding of food. I just wish I had not been so dogmatic and, like I said, kind of wasted time. But time is never wasted. It's just lessons learned. So you're always going to learn a lesson. And then in that time, now I've fallen in love with nutrition. I've always loved training. And now, I finally get some carbohydrates back in my diet and I build some muscle. And then COVID happens and I'm working out 2 times a day. Even though the gym is taken away from me, I got every piece of equipment that I could. I was basically working out with bands and a jump rope twice a day. And eating just, whatever staples we could get. And a few years down the road, 2022 hits, I'm about 30 and I get as shredded as I've ever been. I've finally built more muscle. I learned how to be able to cut on a flexible diet, and I'm finally, as shredded as I've ever been. I really dove in fully to power building because I had kind of wanted to get stronger. And then you realize you can get stronger and build muscle kind of simultaneously, depending on where you're at. Power building is not necessarily maximal for everybody, but it might be really good for some. And with where I was with having a decent amount of muscle mass already, understanding how to train, power building was a great fit for me. And I dove all in and got relatively strong. Like I can hold my own. And when people ask in a conversation, like, how much you squat, how much do you bench, I could tell them. And it was like, all right, yeah, you look the part and you're pretty strong. So it was like, I was exactly where I wanted to be. It was perfect. And still hated myself. Yeah. Yep. Still always wanted more. I was like, why don't I still look different? I was still that fat kid from when I was 8. Who could never get to the body composition that he wanted because something was always not quite there. There was always a soft spot. There was always too much fat. I wanted to be bigger somewhere. I wanted a bigger back. I needed bigger quads. So I still hadn't reached the point. But I can look back at those pictures now and go, that's the best you've ever looked. But I still didn't like it. I still wanted to change it. And it was like, okay, there's something deeper going on here. Like, you need to kind of like reassess where you're at. So, I finally I have at this point found coaching. I finally started trying it, and, you start to meet people and talk to people and you see their perspective and you see where they're at and how much they want to just be you. People are like, I want to look like you, like make me look like you. And it's like, did you guys just listen to the journey that I took you through? I've talked for an hour. about my whole journey in fitness. And it's like, that's what it took. And at no point in the last, what is it now, 20 years since I was 13, had I stopped training. I've been training for 20 years, guys, almost. Like, at no point during that journey did training ever stop or did it ever get less intense. Like, I always trained hard. Like, that was the one great thing from being an athlete is you learned how to push through discomfort. You learned that you had to work hard because your coaches were watching you. And if you didn't, they were going to hold it against you on the field. What you did in the gym directly correlated to them what was going to happen on the field. Like, so it was like I had to push myself in there. And that stuck with me forever, no matter what. Because one, I loved doing it. And two, I saw the result that happens when you actually push that hard on a consistent basis. So that was always a thing. So like failure training, I was really doing pretty close to that for a very extended period of time, especially during my bodybuilding training days. Like I did a ton of volume. I loved doing that. Loved getting a pump. So that was, really the thing. And then I just kind of developed that from there. But, so the training was always there. And I've had to go through all of these different learning about diet, dealing with body image. Like I've been through all of it. I had to, learn to stop drinking, how to manage my life on the weekends, how to build a diet sustainably, how to stick to it on a very, very consistent basis. Again, guys, I told you I was low carb keto for years. Very, very, very strictly. Like maybe one meal a month off of that. Like that was not a low carb meal. Like maybe, but there were probably stretches at a time where that didn't even happen. So we're talking about extended consistency and intensity and putting in a lot of work. It's all been worth it. But again, even at that point, I still hadn't gotten to, what I'll call like enlightenment, or like I hadn't reached this pinnacle of like, I made it. In my mind up here, it still hadn't been reached. And I still had things that I wanted to change and that I was unsatisfied with. And I had to really kind of grapple with, okay, what's really important to me? What is the most important thing to me physically, career-wise, everything in my life? What do I really value? And what makes me the person that I am? Because I had tied it for so long to what I looked like because I loved training and thought that I was supposed to look a certain way, and I thought I was going to become a bodybuilder and all this stuff, that I tied myself to this perfect body image that I realized was never actually attainable. No matter how hard I trained, no matter how hard I dieted, there was always going to be something that I wanted to change. So it was like, what's really important? And it wasn't until very recently that I came back to strength training. When I got the job that I have now at Erie Fitness Academy, and I was around people who were doing powerlifting and taking strength training very seriously. And it's a very free weight based gym. And it was like everybody's training really hard and really heavy. And it was like, I want to do that again. And then it was like, okay, I value being strong. And then, we also take our coaching very seriously. So I value helping people. Okay, well, how can I help people get strong and be satisfied like with how I look? And I realized that what I was doing physically and in my career and in my relationship, none of it had anything to do really with how I looked. Like you need to look the part. People need to understand that you can do the work, but I already had that. I was already there. But for me, I couldn't get that up here. So having to make that transition of like, what do I really value? What is really important? It's how I can help and what I can do physically, and finding strength and shifting my focus to being strong and performing well physically made it easier to let go of what I looked like and understand that there's a level of like, it's good enough. I have my health, I have my physical strength, I'm able to perform. I look like the person that people want to help them, and I feel great about it now. So that's really how I had to overcome it. I still have moments where I look at myself and go, I could look different, but I can let that go now. I couldn't before. It ate at me. I would, not eat certain things because I was like, oh, I'm going to look a certain way or the scale is going to say something. Now I'm not so concerned because I have other values in my life. And the biggest thing is that lifting is still very much one of those. I love to train still. I love to train hard. I love to lift heavy. And I like to fuel myself so that I feel good doing it and that I recover well. I love to build muscle, so I like to fuel myself for that. So that's how I focus on my food now, is what fuels me, what keeps me healthy, what keeps me feeling great. Not just what is this going to make me look like. And that helps me also not overeat on the weekends, because then, Monday's workout is going to be tough if I end up overeating. I still do it from time to time. I still have food issues, and I've had to learn how to manipulate my environment and set my intentions for the weekends and understand, again, the performance aspect and how it's going to make me feel. Really think about that to help me make better decisions, because that is still hard on me as well. So I still deal with all of that, but I've learned how to, put together an environment to succeed and really help myself in that way. And just really understanding food and how it affects my body and my mind has really helped me. But that journey has been incredibly long, and I'm very excited for what the future has to hold. I'm excited to take now this new goal and this new strength pursuit and this new powerlifting pursuit as far as it can possibly go, because I feel great about who I am. I love to train very hard. I love to train heavy. I love to be strong. I love who I am in this body right now. And that's what I'm focused on, is how can I continue to improve that and push myself to the limits, because I still love doing that. As an athlete, as someone who loves being in the gym, we love making progress. So I'm still going to keep fighting to do that as well. And however I can figure that out is really where the science comes in. So we're going to figure out, all the nutrition. We're going to figure out, the best training methods, the best things to do to break plateaus, which I've done a ton of podcasts on at this point, or not a ton, I guess. Feels like a ton, but I've done the podcast on them at this point, so you can go back and listen and understand going forward that this is my perspective, this is where I'm coming from, and I am focused on how do I fuel my body properly, how do I perform the best, how do I get as strong as possible, how do I add muscle, how do I do all of these things. And I want to figure this out for me, and then use that perspective to help you and the people that I coach, and just help gain a great understanding of how we can individualize this for ourselves, but what the general recommendations are and what the science really says. Help distill it down so that we can do all of these things for the right reasons and make it work for us. You see, also, through my journey, there's been multiple different types of training that have worked for me and multiple diets. They all work if you're consistent. So that is the biggest thing, is staying consistent in the gym. That is the one thing I never stopped doing, and I think it always kept me in a place where I never let it go, because clearly I can very easily put on weight, which is great for putting on muscle, but not necessarily great for, if you're not training in the gym and not eating right, it's easy to put on the bad weight, quote unquote, too. So just having that understanding of there's a bunch of different ways to skin this cat and reach our goals. Let's find the ones that work for us. And I've tried a bunch of different ones. I've studied all of them, as many as I can. I try to understand as much of fitness as I possibly can. I'm a junkie for this. You guys see that now. I think you can see maybe that I also have an addictive personality. Lucky for us, I've put that into fitness, and that's my thing now. So I want to understand everything about fitness, not just for me, but for you as well. And I hope this gives you a great understanding of my journey and just where my perspective comes from, especially when I'm talking to you now about, certain diets or certain training methods. This is where I'm coming from. When I'm just talking to other people, hearing their story, relating to it, this is why. This is my perspective. I hope that you enjoyed my TED Talk. I hope that you learned something related to something, or just that we understand each other better. If that's the case, please leave a rating and review if you enjoyed this podcast. Follow me on Instagram at CoachQ_fitness. Follow me at Coach Q on Facebook for more content, to learn more about me, and just get more content and more value from me, my perspective, and what I'm learning about in fitness. And I think that's all I got for this week. And until next week, lifters, I'll see you then.